Big question is, what would the ROK response be if the United States were to recognize the DPRK as a sovereign state? To break the stalemate, and we have to focus our efforts on one or two actions that will actually restore the atmosphere. First of all, why are the North Koreans continuing to build up? Why can't they, in their own minds, come to the conclusion that they have enough? They don't need any more, and they can take SIG's first step and just stop. So far, they don't give any indication that they're prepared to stop. And I honestly don't understand why not. If they do have 40 nuclear weapons, if we are going to proceed with the negotiations, though, one of the first steps I think they're going to have to take, and they aren't going to like it, and it's going to be very difficult, they have to freeze production of fissile material. The reason is it's very difficult for the United States to carry on negotiations with a gun at its head. In 1994, we got them to stop, freeze their facilities at Yongbyon, and that allowed us to proceed with the agreed framework negotiations. It's much more difficult this time because they have many more facilities off Yongbyon, and they don't seem prepared at the moment to allow inspections. There's got to be verification. So that's a big hurdle. We have to get past that. I would ask the question, what would happen if the United States were simply to say, all right, we're going to recognize the DPRK. We're going to establish embassies, and as soon as possible, we'll have an ambassador in place. Big question is, what would the ROK response be if the United States were to recognize the DPRK as a sovereign state? Would it cause big problems, or is it something that you'd be able to live with? Don't forget, this would be a step going back to Henry Kissinger's cross-recognition. China and the USSR were to recognize the ROK, which they did, and the US and Japan were to recognize the DPRK, which they haven't done. Would this satisfy the DPRK, at least initially, as a signal that the US was rolling back its hostile policy? Finally, what could we do on sanctions? I have thought, first of all, we're not going to be able to do much on US sanctions. So any progress will have to be on the UN Security Council sanctions. How could we do that? Well, there's language in the Security Council resolutions which actually provide us a doorway. First of all, the resolutions expressly say that these sanctions are not intended to harm the well-being of the North Korean people. I'm pretty sure the Chinese and probably the Russians pushed for that language to be put in there, and the Americans just shrugged and said, oh, fine, go ahead, we don't care. But now it could be something that we could use beneficially. Secondly, if the North Koreans do anything in the towards denuclearization, it gives the Security Council a chance to go back to its resolutions because each of them says if there's a change in the situation, the Security Council will review. What that meant was if they do something bad, we can go back and tighten sanctions, but it works the other way as well. How could we do that? I think we could divide the sanctions into three baskets. The first basket is what I would call the red basket. That is those elements in the sanctions resolutions that we say, nah, they're too difficult and too contentious, and we'll have to wait for later. So we put those in the red basket, we put them aside. Second basket is the green basket. What is that? It is those parts of the sanctions which clearly affect the well-being of the North Korean people, or you can make the argument, and don't really have much of an impact on the North Korean nuclear weapons program. They may provide some funding, but it's probably not very much. And these were more symbolic than they were really substantive. So we can separate out, or we can try to separate out some that we could move on immediately. And then you have what I call the blue baskets. That is everything that's left over that we're not sure about, and we need to talk more to the North Koreans and to our UN partners to see if there's something we can do on those. Normally the North Koreans would not hold firm to it's all or nothing. You've got to lift all those sanctions or we're not moving. Under normal circumstances, their foreign ministry would bargain on this stuff, and it would be enough to get us started. Question is that their mode of operation these days? And as Sig said, it doesn't seem to be, but we need to test it, and we need to test it in the next 26 days, I think, before the 31st of December.